Welcome to the All Hoops Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman, and I'm joined in person by our all-star producer and co-host, Chris Brito. We're in the final weeks of the NBA season. There's plenty to talk about before we get to all that. Chris, my friend, we got playoffs coming up. How are you? We're in person this time.
Hey, Stevie. I'm so happy to be here in person with you. I feel like it's been since the origins of our podcast, the first time we've done it in person in a very long time. But, as you said, we have a lot to get to. The Knicks seem to be struggling right now a little bit, Steve. I want to get to why we think the Knicks are having a little bit of a rough patch. But the thing I really want to talk about is what's going on with Randall. He's had some instances this year where it seemed like he's been under control for most of it, but he's had some ugly on the court incidents with the refs, and it seemed for a large part of this year he's had it under control with the refs. But lately, it seems like he's sort of losing sight of the moment. And, he's had some ugly instances with Quickly where he's kind of screaming in his face demonstratively. And maybe it's obviously we're fans watching this from our TV screens at home and we're sort of making it bigger than what it is. But do you think there's anything there?
I don't. I think guys get upset when they're not winning games. It's not a Randall problem. It's an athlete problem, right? It happens. This is something that happens. It's not
true.
To me.
It happens to us.
It's not a huge deal. Obviously, you'd like him to be more under control and poised. But to me, the season will not come down to Randall losing his cool. I think it could come down to my biggest concern with the Knicks during their losing streak, which is Jalen Brunson's been getting hunted on defense. People have been attacking him, trying to get switches, get him on there. He's undersized. We know that. He's been dealing with some injuries. Maybe that's affecting his quickness. And I kind of thought teams would kind of do this to start the year. And they haven't really. And for the most part, it really only has been going on for the last week or so. So hopefully this is only a temporary thing. Jalen can get back to getting healthy. And they can kind of hide him a little bit on defense and avoid some of those switches. But for the most part, that's my biggest concern with this team right now. Defensively, they've been getting chewed up, and that starts with Jalen Brunson. They've lost 3 in a row and 6 of 9.
Yeah, I think the Brunson thing is really concerning. It seemed to me it hasn't really been an issue that's impacted the Knicks until recently. The Heat did a great job exploiting that. Orlando did a great job exploiting that this week. And it's a little concerning, but I don't doubt that Tibbs will figure it out. And at the same time, it's true that Brunson will give up points, but Brunson also scores a lot of points. So I guess you could argue that it sort of offsets each other.
But we don't need it to offset each other.
We don't want it to.
Brunson to be way better.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, it's a problem, and I hope it'll get addressed. Related to the Knicks. Unless you want to talk about the Knicks more.
No, I think they just got to get better defensively. They're still in 5th place. Yeah. Things are good. That's the matchup we're rooting for. We're rooting for a Cavs-Knicks first-round matchup where I think the Knicks have a legit chance of upsetting the Cavs in that series. So the hope is that, at 42 and 33, you have, 7 games left in the NBA regular season. The hope is that you can win 4 or 5 of those, hold on to the 5 seed, and get into the playoffs feeling good.
And I think the most important game that they need to get is that game against the Heat this week, in a few days coming up. Once we have the season series against them, I feel a lot better moving forward. That'll be at the Garden, so that's good. Related to the Knicks are the Mavs. In many ways, and more than others, the Knicks are attached to the hip to the Mavericks, because of that Porzingis trade a few years ago, and because Brunson came to New York. So the Mavs right now, if the playoffs started, they'd be out of the play-in game. So that has a lot of implications for us because we have their first-round pick this year, but it's top 10 protected. If they miss the playoffs completely, we don't have that pick. But if they make the play-in, that's the best-case scenario for us if we want the draft pick. We'll get an 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th pick around there. So my question to you is, the Mavs, what's the best case scenario for us, for the Knicks fans, and what do you think they should be doing for the rest of the season? Should they be aiming to tank?
the Mavs should not be aiming to tank. The goal is always to have the best situation for Luka. What's going to make Luka most excited, happy about being in Dallas? And, they lost to the Hornets. We watched the game, Friday night. They're full of 36 and 38 in the year. And Luka after the game looked miserable. And he came out and said, quote, "Sometimes I don't feel it's me. I'm just being out there. I used to have a lot of fun smiling on the court, but it's just been so frustrating for a lot of reasons, not just basketball." And so for me, losing more games is not the answer here. And usually that's the answer when you're in this middle ground of no man's land. But you have Kyrie Irving, you have Luka Doncic. There's no reason why this offense shouldn't be clicking. Take the last, 7 games of the regular season or whatever it is and get right. Get this team right. And if you're a Knicks fan, you're rooting for this to continue. They're right now, if the season ended today, the Mavs would be out of the playoffs and the Knicks would have the 11th pick in the draft. And to me, that's perfect. That's exactly what you're looking for. So in an ideal world for the Knicks, you're hoping the Mavs go, 3-4, 4-3, somewhere around those lines. Finish somewhere between 9 and 11 in the Western Conference, and you go get that. You go get a top pick that you're probably going to trade.
So I want to fixate on one thing that you were quoting Luka on. He said he was frustrated, and it's like he also seemed to allude that there were things not close and not related to basketball. He said not just basketball.
Yeah.
So, listen, I'm not saying Kyrie's the reason why he's unhappy. I don't want to insinuate that, but since Kyrie has came to the team, the Mavs are 7-12, and even with the players they had before, they were on a top 4, top 5 track. I'm curious to see what he means by not just basketball. I wonder if he's alluding to something else. Maybe he's just going through a rough patch personally. But it's just interesting to me that he's saying that right now.
Do you believe at this very moment, and we know things are going to change a lot.
For sure.
Do you believe at this very moment Kyrie Irving will be a Dallas Maverick next season?
I think so, but only because the Mavericks don't want to look stupid that they gave away a first-round pick for him. They don't want to look idiotic in not trying to find a replacement for Brunson that they never found. And I think Kyrie doesn't have a lot of options. I think those are the 3 reasons why he's going to be a Maverick next year.
I think he could definitely be a Maverick next year. My question is, what about the Phoenix Suns? I can see that being an option for them. They were reportedly talking to the Nets about a Kyrie, Chris Paul kind of swap before he went to Dallas. Now, all of a sudden, if Phoenix falls short, if Dallas falls short, 2 things that are very possible. I can see a scenario where Phoenix goes, Durant has had some success with Kyrie. He wants Kyrie here. Let's actually do that. And they're going to go give Kyrie the max, and we'll sign and trade, maybe for Chris Paul.
Yeah.
Dallas can all of a sudden talk about how we need Chris Paul's leadership in this struggling situation. And I can see that right now. That's my guess of how this thing plays out.
See, the other scenario, this is the dark horse scenario of this whole thing. And silently, what I'm rooting for. For the Mavericks to miss the playoffs completely, and I don't think this will happen either, and then the Mavericks sort of looking at crossroads and deciding what they want to do with Luka. Is he the person that they want to move forward with? Or maybe it's a scenario where the Knicks could sneak in and try to take him away. He already has a relationship with Brunson. Who knows how it'll work out in New York for Luka, or maybe if he's even interested. We don't know if he's even interested in that. Denver could be another place for Luka too, because he has a closer relationship with Jokic. I think at some point the Mavericks got to look at themselves in the mirror, and they're like, we've tried to pair him up with Porzingis. We've tried to pair him up with Christian Wood, Kyrie Irving. We've added different guys around him so that it complements his biggest strengths.
Different head coaches.
At what point do the Mavericks say, listen, we've tried? And, I don't think you can argue that the Mavs haven't tried.
No, they're trying. It's just most of these moves are bad. And
they're bad moves, but you're right. They're bad moves, but I think at the same time, it's what do you do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I don't see the Mavs getting to that point unless Luka comes out and says, I want out. I'm not going to re-sign here. I want out. And then I think this thing would drag on for probably a year, just like the Kevin Durant one did. When you have a top 5 player in the NBA, you hold on for dear life. You just hold on to that player, even if he's kicking and screaming and trying to force his way out. You find a way to make him happy, and you make this work. So, yes, if hypothetically Luka wants out and Dallas accommodates him, I think New York is at the top of the list. I do. You mentioned the Brunson thing. You can basically, you have Randall. You can move Randall. You can keep Randall and have that as the big 3. You have, all these different things. Obviously, Barrett would probably be in that deal, but you can make it work. You can make a lot of different things work. And does that mean I think they're going to win a championship with that group? No, because it's probably just last year's Mavericks and Julius Randle. At the same time, if you're the Knicks, you would do that 100 out of 100 times.
Oh, totally.
All the young players, all the picks, you would make that work. But we're far way away from that right now. And I do believe that the Mavericks will make the play-in, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, let's get to our final thoughts right after this. All right, Chris, final thoughts time here on the All Hoops podcast. We are live. We are in person. It feels good. Other things that feel good, Kevin Durant coming back in a couple weeks. Actually, next week, March 29th versus Minnesota.
Should be an interesting one. Okay, I'm glad for... it was really scary to see Kevin Durant getting injured off a freak injury. He was going for a dunk during warm-ups, and then he just slipped in. Oh, layup dunk was? I forget what it was.
Yeah.
He slipped. It was a freak injury, but it's good to see that it wasn't that serious, and he'll have some reps with the team. Because I think right now the Suns with Kevin Durant are probably the Western Conference favorites.
Yeah, I would put Denver as the favorite because I don't trust the Suns' health. Between Paul and, Booker's missed a lot of time this year, and Durant, they've been 3 guys who have just not been consistently healthy this season or in years past.
Yes, I think you're right, but I think they're all getting healthy at the right time.
Yeah, and I'm not really too concerned with how Kevin Durant's going to fit on that team.
He fits everywhere.
He fits everywhere. And we talked about it, those wings who can kind of play both offense and defense. Those are the easiest guys to move into your team. And we talked about that. And so I have no doubts that Kevin Durant's going to be fine and fit with this Phoenix team if they can get him healthy. So we just got to wait and see and hope that happens, because a Denver-Phoenix Western Conference Finals that could go 6-7 games would be must-watch TV. It would be a great time.
Yep, agreed. And then related, Paul George, he had an ugly injury the other night when they were playing against, I believe, OKC, was it? And he's out for 2 to 3 weeks. It looked a lot scarier. I think everybody in the basketball world thought a lot of things, but we're all sort of grateful that it's not as serious as it looks. And then semi-related, let's get to our next topic first.
Well, I want to say something about George.
Oh, go ahead.
What a disaster this Clipper season is. I mean, last year they barely made the play-in. George gets COVID, and then they lose the play-in. And I don't think he's going to play again this year. I think we're talking about, if it's 3 weeks, that's past the play-in. They're not. I don't know if they're going to make it out of that play-in.
But right now they're 5th?
No, I think they're I don't think they're going to make it to the playoffs without him. I think they're going to have to be in the play-in. And so, because of that reason, I'm not sure they're going to get out of that. Can they get there?
Well, right now they're 39 and 35. They're 4th in the West. I mean, it's not a big
they're
gap.
They're a game and a half. They're a game and a half out of 8.
2 games and a half.
2
games.
2 games out of 8. So, to me, that's very possible that they don't make it.
I don't know. I think otherwise. But
we've seen it happen before with them.
Oh, I agree. But I think it's because we didn't have Kawhi. And I think they have Kawhi. They have the better player out of both of them playing. And
we'll see. Keep in mind, I picked them to win it all.
No, I agree.
I'm sorry, I picked them to make the finals against the Bucks, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm so down on them.
I think they'll be fine.
All right, Chris, last topic here. You wanted to bring this up. We watched Joel Embiid cook the Warriors last night, and Draymond came out to the game and said basically, Joel took this personally that Draymond said Joker is the hardest guy to guard in the league. And so Embiid took that personal. He put up 45. You can clearly tell that he wants this MVP, whereas everyone else kind of pretends like it doesn't really mean that much to me. I'm only focused on championship. Embiid wants this. Does that change how you view your MVP vote.
I mean, I put a bet on Embiid to win the MVP, so I'm rooting for him to win. But I just think that like those three guys are like Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid are all worthy people of MVP consideration. And like whatever argument you have is it's probably good enough. The one thing I'll say with Embiid is that he's willing the Sixers team into the number 2 seed right now in the East. Like you can tell Embiid is like clearly hitting another level of his offensive bag. I mean, he was unguardable last night. It didn't matter what you did. And, like, you could argue he is probably the hardest person to guard in the NBA, maybe aside from Giannis.
Yeah. I mean, we watched the highlights. We watched the game. You know, him backing down Draymond in the post, him doing shimmies and one-legged, you know, jumpers like Dirk, and then him hitting threes. Like, he can attack in any way. And for me, that is just incredible. And then on top of that, you know, rim protector, guy who kind of leads his defense. It's been a great year for Joel Embiid, and I think as of right now, he will be my vote. And again, there's also recency bias in all this stuff.
Oh, of course.
Joker's won 2. Giannis has won before. Embiid is literally coming out and saying he's desperate for this. He wants this. This is important to him. And so I believe that I think right now he's going to be the guy.
It should be, as he should. And he's also in a tougher conference. I think that has something to do with it also. The one thing I wanted to talk about that we spoke about at length yesterday was Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown and his situation with the Boston Celtics. You know, he basically had a few big interviews this week, and more or less insinuated that nothing is you know, he's going to go where he's supported and beloved, respected, and he didn't like signal like a complete 100% to Boston, so I'm assuming there's like a little bit of a wedge there, and you know, potentially a possibility that he could leave the team when he's a free agent in a year. Correct. That being said, who wouldn't want Jaylen Brown on his team? But I think that if we added a piece like Jaylen Brown to the Knicks, I think that is the piece of the puzzle that we need.
Those two-way wings, they're so easy to put into the puzzle. And I'm not sure where this is going to go, but I don't think the talk has been overblown. I do believe this is a legit superstar guy who could potentially leave his franchise in his 20s. And so it's a big deal. It would impact the entire NBA. Yeah. And I think we'll know a big part of this summer, because this summer Jaylen Brown will be eligible for an extension. He'll be eligible for a Supermax if he can make one of the 3 All-NBA teams, which coincidentally, as of this moment, he's played more minutes at forward than at guard this year. Forward's going to be easier for him to make the 3rd-team All-NBA. I think as of this moment, he would. Mm-hmm. Do the Celtics offer him the Supermax? If they do, does he take it? What if they offer him less than the Supermax, and he goes, you know what, I'm leaving?
Yeah.
So a lot of things can play out this summer, and if he does not take an extension this summer as a Supermax eligible player, then I think he's as good as gone. If he can get every dollar he can get this summer and not wait till next summer and doesn't take it, he's gone. So we're going to know. And so I think we're all kind of rooting to see him make that All-NBA 3rd team just to see how this thing plays out and not have to wait a year to see that.
Oh, yeah. I think Jaylen Brown, the situation with him is so fascinating, because I think Bill Simmons talked about it a little bit on The Ringer on his podcast. He was basically saying that like the Celtics never said anything publicly about that potential trade with Kevin Durant.
As in, like, we don't want to trade Jaylen Brown.
Right, which to me sounds like the most obvious PR spin to do to in a situation like that. But they never did it, which I thought was kind of telling, or blame it on Brad Stevens' sort of inexperience, which I don't know if it's even a valid thing.
But like Brad Stevens is just one guy. Like, they have PR people, they have an owner, they have a ton of people who can come out and be like, we did not want to trade Jaylen Brown, or it's Kevin Durant. He's the only player in the league we would have traded Jaylen Brown for. There's so many ways you could have came out and said, we love Jaylen Brown, we envision Jaylen Brown being here for a decade, and they didn't do that. That doesn't mean they don't want him. It just means they screwed up. And that Jaylen Brown is now taking that personally, and now the Knicks, Atlanta, maybe the Heat, Dallas, bunch of teams are in play to potentially get a two-way guy who may not have even hit his prime.
That's really exciting.
It sure is. And that's going to do it for us on the All Hoops podcast. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening on our Apple, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcast. Thank you for watching on YouTube. We'll be back next week to put a bow on the NBA regular season and talk a little NBA playoffs.